Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
It is a tragic day. It's a day of boundless sorrow, of indescribable pain. 4-year-old Ariel Bibas, his baby brother, 1-year-old Kfir, and 84-year-old Oded Lifshitz were brutally murdered by Hamas savages. Their bodies returned home to a nation in mourning, a nation that will never forget and never forgive the evil that cut down these beautiful souls. Since that black day on October 7th, when Hamas butchered and burned 1,200 of our families and friends, Israel waited with bated breath, hoping beyond hope that our hostages would survive the Hamas hell. Against all odds, we succeeded to bring many home. Some we rescued, some we tragically couldn't. The Bibas children in particular became the symbol of who we are and who we're fighting against. Here's a photo of the Bibas brothers. These perfect children, again, were 4 years old and less than 1 year old when the Hamas savages snatched them from their mother's arms. She fought like a lioness to protect her boys. Just imagine their horror. Imagine their confusion. Perfect little children who never hurt a soul. A baby, for the love of God. They languished in captivity until Hamas murdered them in cold blood. Who kidnaps a little boy and a baby and murders them? Monsters, that's who. These Hamas monsters also cynically refused to bring back the boy's mother, Shiri, and sent the body of a Gazan woman instead, in brazen violation of the agreement. Today, the heavens shake. The entire civilized world should condemn these horrific murders. The entire civilized world should join Israel in demanding the immediate release of all the hostages. All of Israel is united in grief. And as the Prime Minister of Israel, I vow that I will not rest until the savages who executed our hostages are brought to justice. They do not deserve to walk this earth. Nothing will stop me. Nothing. Ariel, Kfir, and Oded, I'm so sorry we couldn't save you from the monsters who did this. We honor your kind and loving souls, so tragically cut down by evil terror. May your memories forever be a blessing and a reminder to all of us that we must fight this evil and eradicate it from the face of this earth.
No quarter. No quarter for the savages that killed the Bibas babies and their mom. None. That's what I suggest. I'm just an American, though. But I am a former military person and a commander. That's what I would do as a commander. I'd be on them already. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Roku, and Amazon Fire. Plus, we've got an app for your phone. The savages, that's too kind of a word for the Hamas Nazi killers who strangled the 2 little Bibas boys, murdered them in cold blood. Then, piling on more humiliation, the monsters held a celebration over their coffins at the hostage release spectacle. They didn't even return their mom's body. They put a fake body or an unknown body in the coffin. The Bibas family funeral is today. It's already happened. We'll show you that the entire nation of Israel is mourning these deaths. There was another funeral this week, too. This one in Beirut. And the Israeli Defense Forces showed up with a message that will make you smile if you hate these Islamo-Nazis that only bring death and destruction everywhere that they are. But with the reelection of Donald Trump back to the presidency, we have some hope, even for the very few innocent Palestinians that might remain in the devastation of what is now Gaza. Yes, even though we all know they brought this on themselves, we Americans still desire a solution to be found so all can live in peace and prosperity in the Middle East and around the world. We're not opposed to that at all. In fact, we don't understand the totalitarianism of the Islamists. And President Trump recognizes that Islamic totalitarianism must be eliminated and has proposed an innovative solution for Gaza that is generating movement in places that hasn't happened before. Well, my guest today to discuss all this is veteran TV news producer, host of the Analyst Substack, a former diplomat, and the host of Real America's Voice, American Sunrise Early Edition, Jake Novak. Jake, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Colonel. Wish it were under better circumstances. But, on the other hand, this is a good circumstance because it's a chance for us to clarify for all your viewers and followers and anyone else who might share it, the realities in the situation. Congratulations to you for having the moral courage to hammer it out as clearly as it needs to be. I understand there's a lot of gray areas in international politics and in war. Of course they are. We're not that naive. But at the same time, this is one of those cases where there are no gray areas. And there will be no gray areas in the pursuing of justice for the Bibas children and their mom.
Oh, absolutely. There is no gray area. Not for me. Not as a professional military man, a commander, not as a human being, Jake. And quite frankly, I'm disappointed in the lack of media coverage of the funeral today. As you know, I do clip research and a lot of research for my show. And I do have one we'll show at the opening of the next segment. But there is very little real, actual coverage of the mourning and grief that these families are going through, and the entire nation. I mean, these two little boys, they're babies, really. I mean, 4 years old and 9 months old. I think, to be strangled by hand and then pummeled with stones to try to make it look like it was some kind of Israeli Defense Force air attack, and then delivered back as part of an agreement to repatriate hostages. It just boggles my mind that there are human beings in the world that could do something like this. And we're going to cover it. We're going to cover it all. My first question for you about this issue, and the reason I showed Mr. Netanyahu at the beginning is he going to be able to hold these savages accountable? Because it looks like there's some back and forth as far as some of the Israeli people holding Mr. Netanyahu accountable for the October 7th and not getting the hostages home and those kind of things, when all this blame is at the feet of the Islamo-Nazis, from Iran to Beirut to Gaza to the West Bank.
Yeah, so I'm going to make 3 quick points to answer your question to clarify a couple of things. First of all, when it comes to accountability for all of Hamas and all of Gaza, that is the thing that is up for, I wouldn't say it's up for debate, but that's going to be the more difficult thing. But let me assure everyone watching, the people who did this to the Bibas family are known to the Israeli forces, their names and where they are. They will be killed. They will be killed very soon. And if somehow one of them gets a chance to escape, they will never be let off the hook. Very similar to, for those of you who may remember, to the Munich Olympics massacre, when every single one of those terrorists was hunted down in a relatively short amount of time, considering how far-flung some of them were across the world. They were found and they were killed. And there will be no moral worries or moral equivocation about it. By the way, there was no moral equivocation about the Munich terrorists either. Don't watch the Steven Spielberg movie about it, because that's the whole movie, is about how guilty the Israeli agents were. I know some of those agents. There was no guilt. Okay, there was no problem there. Second thing is, we've all heard of the term Stockholm Syndrome, which most of us think only has one aspect to it. The aspect of when you're taken prisoner or taken hostage, you suddenly have an affinity for either the actual hostage taker or their cause. But there's a second, actually a much more common form of Stockholm Syndrome, which doesn't get talked about enough. And that is when people are taken hostage or victimized, they often turn on one another. They point fingers at one another, sometimes while they're even in captivity, or while they're feeling victimized. It's a natural thing to do. You start saying to the person across from you in the cell or in the holding area, you were the one who was too flashy. You said something wrong. It's totally normal, but we can't succumb to it. We have to understand that people blaming Netanyahu or blaming people, I'm not talking about the preparedness of the Israeli Defense Forces before October 7th. That's a tactical matter. But I'm talking about from a strategy point of view, from a political point of view, it's really a form of Stockholm Syndrome mental illness to blame Benjamin Netanyahu for the killing of these hostages. That's a normal thing, but it's not a good thing. It's a common response. And finally, when we talk about the whole world, the whole world, look, they're not going to want to pay attention to this because they don't want to come to the grips with the fact that they have been supporting both, and we're finding out every day how much the U.S. taxpayer has been supporting. We've been supporting these monsters for a long time, and you're right to use the term not monsters, and you're even more correct to use the term Islamo-Nazis. It's not a comparative phrase you're using, Colonel. It's real. The actual Nazis, I'm talking about the Hitler, Goebbels Nazis, created and funded the terrorist Islamist movement. They created it. It was a very small, fractured group that the Nazis took an interest in the late 1920s, before they were even in power in Germany, and then funded them. They are, for those of you who are Harry Potter fans, the Islamo-Nazis, Hamas, Hezbollah, they are Hitler's last Horcrux. They are the last version of the Nazis on this earth, and they need to be treated like the original Nazis were, and that is with no quarter, as you said.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. As a matter of fact, I'll just point out for the audience that I carved out a space for the limited number of innocent Palestinians that may live in Gaza or anywhere else in the Middle East or around the world. But I said it the way I did because the number is very small when you're talking about Gaza, because a lot of the people that went into southern Israel and killed, maimed, butchered, burnt, cooked, and abducted people like the Bibas family were Palestinian civilians that were volunteers. So we can't not acknowledge that. And then the voting. I mean, the last time there was a vote held for the government, the reason Hamas is in charge in Gaza is because the voters in Gaza, which are Palestinians, voted them in at a rate of over 85%, if I remember correctly. So we still have to acknowledge there are some innocent people in this. And look, I'm not really satisfied with what I've heard about the after action reporting and corrections based on the tactical issue of being caught by surprise and the entire Israeli defense apparatus and structure letting down the Israeli people. And it's not just Jewish people either. I mean, there are non-Jews that are involved in this that were killed and abducted and those kind of things too. So I'm not satisfied with what I've seen on that, but I'm also not in the military. I'm not in a command structure. I'm just an American citizen that is willing to provide support for them to be able to defend themselves. But what I am going to say is, just like you, we can't allow this to overcome us. The Stockholm syndrome or the syndrome of wanting to blame the government of Israel or the Israeli Defense Forces. That's all going to be worked through at some point in this. It probably will never satisfy, especially the families that are left behind, of the hostages that have been murdered and the people that were murdered and killed. But that will come out in the end, and corrections will be made, I'm sure, if not already, some of them, which are probably likely classified. So that's where I'm at. But what I demand, and the reason why I jumped at the chance to do this show today, when we talked the other day, is that we have to show this. We have to be very clear in our language about this issue. I'm glad you brought up the German Nazis. There's an individual called the Grand Mufti that is on record, on film, in writing, on pictures, video, not video, but film, actual film that's probably now video, with Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Germany military leaders and those kind of folks. And this ideology is continuing. It's the one continuing thread from Nazi Germany that annihilated 6 million plus people, most of them Jewish people. And it's the reason why the state of Israel really exists today. And we've got to stamp it out. We've got to stamp it out like cockroaches that are running when the lights turned on. We got to take a break, Jake. When we come back, we'll see that one clip that I found that was suitable to show about the funeral that's happening. That's already happened today. The little Bibas boys and their mother were laid to rest today in Israel, and the entire nation came out to mourn these little babies, and the entire world should be mourning. I know I am. I feel terrible about it. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're going to continue to blow this whistle about the Islamo-Nazis for as long as it takes until they're annihilated. I'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at WVWFoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at WVWFoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Later tonight, Australian time, late in the morning, Southern Israel time, the Bibas family will hold a funeral for their mother, Shiri, and her two little boys, Ariel and Kafir. The ceremony will be live streamed in Israel. It will affect and torment that whole nation and many people around the world. This is the horror of Hamas and the October the 7th atrocities, the death cult of Islamist extremist terrorism, manifesting itself in the deliberate abduction and murder of a mother and her two little boys. These are the human faces, the victims of an inhuman hatred. May they rest in peace. I just want to go to some live pictures now that I believe we're getting in from Israel. These are of people parading in the streets ahead of that Bibas family funeral. People will be marking this occasion right across the length and breadth of Israel, not only in southern Israel where the actual funeral will occur, but there are some live pictures of people now preparing for that horrible funeral service, which will be happening about 8:30 our time in Australian time, 11:30 in the morning Israeli time.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. My guest is Real America's Voice show host from American Sunrise Early Edition, Jake Novak, who is an expert on Israeli-American relations, a former diplomat also, and helping us work through this issue of this funeral. And I couldn't get much footage of the crowd, but that was early in the day that you saw in that clip there, Jake. But the still photographs that I was able to see, it's massive, and it should be massive because these little boys, especially these two little boys, should be memorialized forevermore as the symbol of this atrocity that's continuing at the hands of these Nazis. It's incredible that the world that defeated Nazi Germany and the Empire of Japan for their atrocities so aggressively is allowing this to continue and continue and continue for decades.
Yeah, back in the 1970s, when we first started to see Western governments, including our own, allowing a little too much of this Islamist aggression, or in the case of just it before really Islamism really took hold again, when we're just talking about maybe nations like Egypt and Syria, the excuse, Rob, was oil. crude oil. We didn't want to see Americans having to pay too much money at the gas tank, at the gas station. And Europe, of course, has even less oil reserves than the United States. And so that was the excuse, and certainly not excusing it. But that was always the narrative. That's not the narrative anymore. You know, there are some good things that have come out of, I wouldn't say come out of, but there are things we've learned since October 7th. For example, Saudi Arabia, which could have cut off and really drastically cut production. Actually, the price of oil is quite lower than it was on October 6, 2023. We were at the $90 a barrel, even more than that level. We're at the $68 a barrel level today, and that has a lot to do with Saudi Arabia not taking advantage of the situation, remaining a tacit, at least cooperating country with Israel and the United States. So that's good. And, you know, another good thing is, you know, these were redheaded boys. Of course, we say redhead. Of course, really orange, right? I don't know how redheaded turned into the name for orange hair, but you know, if you look in the streets and on, not just online, if you're walking around New York City today or some other cities, you're seeing a lot of people wearing orange-colored shirts, women wearing orange-colored earrings, and they're not all Jewish people. They're not all people who are typically supporters of Israel. So it's been very encouraging to see that. We know that the world is not completely turning its back on us. I don't ever take that narrative in my heart. And you know, I can't, because I wake up every morning here in the United States, and this is something everyone should hear. I wake up every morning here in the United States living among the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the Christian Jewish boys who, along with a smaller number of Jewish soldiers, because the Jewish population in this country was less than 1.5% at the time. But I live among the descendants of the Christian boys who saved the Jewish people. Period. Full stop.
Yeah, it's amazing that I'm speechless, because I hadn't really thought about it that way, honestly, Jake, until you just said it. But you're right. You're right. You know, the Americans and Europeans that were able to fight all around the globe, because the Nazi thing was all around the globe. I mean, they were even in the Pacific where the Japanese were too. So this was a global war against this stuff. And those Christian boys, they really stepped up. They really stepped up, quite frankly, and sacrificed a lot. And honestly, you know, we're with you. Not you necessarily, but Israel. I think in part because we acknowledge that. You know, I have a uncle. He's passed now, but he was in Patton's army, and he was one of the people that unfortunately was required to liberate a concentration camp. And he only spoke to me one time about it, very, very late in life. I never heard him talk about it. I wasn't aware of it until he actually told me the story, and we were alone. He was still, even in his 80s, in a state of shock based on what he saw. And he explained to me that his team and the guys that he was with would never, ever, ever forget that. And that's why they supported the creation of the state of Israel. Obviously, he was around, and my aunt were around when that happened, and would continue to do that. She's still alive, but probably going to pass here soon. He passed a few years ago, and it was on his mind. Even he had dementia, but I knew it was on his mind because his grandchildren told me about it when I spoke at his funeral. That's what type of soldiers America fielded.
Yeah, you know, it's important to talk about that. First of all, I want to remember the disclaimer for anyone who's watching this and they're like, oh, why are we talking about the Holocaust? It is connected, as we were talking about before. The Nazis, the literal Nazis, I'm not talking about skinheads, I'm talking about the literal Nazis, cultivated Islamist terror in a huge way. They didn't create it, but they cultivated it and they funded it. So this is an absolutely germane conversation. But I want to say something about the liberation of the camps. You know, International Holocaust Memorial Day was last month, and that is usually coordinated. It's coordinated to the liberation of Auschwitz. And I understand why, because Auschwitz was the biggest camp. It was the one where most people died. But I think here in the United States, we should do something differently. Auschwitz was liberated by the Red Army, by the Russians. And I understand why they did it. But when they got there, they lined up all the guards and they just shot them. And they shot a lot of the people around the camp, too. I certainly am not crying over that. But it's disappointing that they did that, because those people should have been tried, and the data and all the facts should have been brought out. But the United States liberated, among other camps, and most importantly, Buchenwald. That's probably where your uncle was. Buchenwald was liberated, and that was also a horrible camp. And here's what the United States did. He didn't get there the first day, because as you correctly said, that was Patton's armored division. But Eisenhower showed up a day or two later, and here's what he did. He was outraged by what he saw, and he ordered all the American troops there to round up every man, woman, and child within a 2 or 3 mile radius of Buchenwald and march them through the crematoria, march them through the barracks, and told them, don't ever say you didn't know what was going on here. I think you did anyway, but now I know for sure. That is really a great, and again, once again, an example of how the United States handled that war so much better than the other allies, let alone our enemies. That is a day. I think we should commemorate that day. That was in April of 1945. I think that should be the U.S. Day, that we not only commemorate the liberation of the camps, but that should be the American Holocaust Memorial Day, because of what Eisenhower did and because of what people like your uncle did.
Yeah, he died with a broken heart over that. That's and probably tell I'm getting emotional about it now. Well, we got a hand up over in the audience. Shell's the host over there. Let's go take that question. Go ahead, Shell. Try it again. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Colonel. This is Joseph. Jake, I have a question for you about, we found out recently through all the different revelations through USAID and all this other stuff about how much of this money was funneled to the people in Hamas, literally. How does that, play into the whole, what we're going to do?
Well, that is such an important question. I want everyone to know, while I am obviously a very big supporter of Israel, and I do come from a traditional Jewish family, I'm also a 7th generation American, and I consider myself to be an America First supporter of President Trump and things like that. I've always been America First. And now it's even easier to be an America First supporter of Israel, because we're finding out through all these revelations, just from the USAID, there's going to be more, that the amount of money that we've been funneling to not only Hamas, but the other enemies of Israel easily dwarfs the amount of money that the U.S. has been guaranteeing. Because, the U.S. doesn't send cash over to Israel. What it does is it backs the loans to Israel for them to buy American-made and Israeli-made, along with the Americans, weaponry and defense systems. That's the form of American support, which is very important, but technically it's not aid. We should just make that clear. But I'm not being facetious here. I understand. Of course, the United States supports Israel in a very, very substantial way. But if you cut off all the aid tomorrow, based on what we learned, Israel would still come out ahead. I'm laughing because there's a lot of people who pretend to be America First, who really just hate Israel, and they say, I want to cut off aid. And when I say, okay, let's cut it off to the enemies of Israel too, they hem and they haw. And I'm laughing now because it turns out that if you did do that, it would really help Israel a lot, actually, because it would defund their enemies. We must understand this. And it's not something that's been going on for that long, thank goodness. There's been sort of naive funding of these groups for over the years and naive support. But what we're uncovering now in the USAID office is deliberate, well-known, knowledgeable funding of Hamas and other groups like that in really basically a money laundering scheme, a way to get them money and to help them do terrorist activities. This must have been part of what the Obama administration wanted to do. And then the Biden administration took up the mantle. Very, very serious stuff, and so sad that our American taxpayer money is going to kill our allies, and I promise you, also kill Americans too. Don't be fooled. All that money to the Taliban, all that money to the other terrorist groups, it's not just Israelis, it's Americans are being killed too. This has to stop. Thank God we're uncovering it.
Yeah, that's why you have people that have been in the intelligence side, on the American side, like Sarah Adams, that are coming out and they're speaking out about this issue, because we've allowed so many Islamic-based individuals like Afghanistan. We have over 70,000 refugees here that were not vetted by the Biden administration. USAID funded the concrete company that built the tunnel infrastructure inside Gaza. There were direct medical aid from USAID going to Gaza. And everybody knows, right? In Gaza, the government is Hamas, and Hamas is the government. Everything that goes there gets touched by Hamas first, and they take it. And they may sell it to people that actually need it if it's like a foodstuff, but it's going to make their soldiers fat, as you've seen in these capture videos where they've been stripped because you can't tell if they have a explosive vest on their body or something. They're well-fed. They're well-fed terrorist soldiers, and the people of Gaza, the regular people, they don't get the food and the aid. So it's pretty dramatic. That was a great question. Well, we got to take another break, Jake. When we come back, we're going to see that other funeral, and I want to get your take on the surprise the IDF gave in Beirut earlier this week. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Hey, consider going to MyPillow.com right now and get your pet a pet bed, just like my beloved Delta has right here in my office. Not only can you get pet beds, but you can get sheets, towels, blankets, and so much more. Slippers, sandals, robes, beach towels. It just goes on and on. But please, go to MyPillow.com and be sure to use the promo code B66. When you do, not only will you receive savings, but a generous percentage of each purchase comes back to continue supporting this 24/7 free broadcast outlet. We need your support. Hey, look, we're entrepreneurs, just like my friend Mike Lindell. We all need your support, and you're getting quality products at the same time. So please, go to MyPillow.com and use the promo code B66. Mike always has amazing specials going right there at MyPillow. So check out whatever those specials might be today. You never know. Mike's always changing it up and making new offers right there at MyPillow.com. But be sure to use the promo code B66.
We are now walking outside of the stadium in the neighborhood surrounding the stadium after what was a historic funeral for Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and Sayyid Safiuddin. Now, during that ceremony, the Israeli Air Force twice passed over, danger close and low. To intimidate and to show force against the crowd. The crowd was made up of civilians, mostly women and children, who had come to pay their respects to Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and Sayyid Safiuddin. And the stadium was full of dignitaries, including the Speaker of the Majlis in Iran, the Iranian Foreign Minister, the Speaker in the Iraqi Parliament, and many other dignitaries from around the world. Of course, as an American citizen, it was quite shocking to see my taxpayer dollars flying right over my head. But of course, this is proof and further indication of the intimidation and the violation of Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity as Israel continues to enter Lebanese airspace without the permission of the Lebanese government and officials. This was really something that shocked the crowd, but what ended up happening was the crowd chanted in unison, "Down with Israel, down with America." And so it's very important to recognize that those intimidation tactics do not serve the purpose of intimidating the people, but rather uniting them, as we saw in the stands today. Christopher Halali here in Beirut for DD Geopolitics.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and that right there is one of the other reasons why I wanted to do this show today. And my guest is Jake Novak. He's the host of Real America's Voice, American Sunrise Early Edition. And really an expert on American-Israeli relations, a former diplomat himself, with a lot of decades of work in foreign policy and that kind of area. Jake, I had to show that was an American. I suspect he had has some kind of connection to the military because he used the term danger close, although it was incorrectly used when he was talking about the Israeli jets flying over. And he spouted all the propaganda bullets that you hear from Hezbollah. Well, the Israelis just violated Lebanese airspace. They are intimidating women and children. Now, I've watched the videos of the crowd in that stadium at Nasrallah and his second guy, who only lasted a week. It was both their funerals today. The guy on the video, I let it play because I want people to see how stupid some Americans are, or they think we're stupid, because that's an issue that I think needs to be addressed much more aggressively by our society. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about it? And how do you think the students that have been protesting in support of Hamas should be feeling about it, and Hezbollah should be feeling about it, when we know that these people, they're just Nazis. That's what they are. We've already established that.
There's a lot to unpack from that video. Let me start with the man's name. His first name was Christopher. Christopher, they're going to kill you. Okay, it doesn't matter that you're an Arab or that you're a Christian if your name is Christopher, or you have at least one Christian parent. So first of all, you're a moron. Second of all, what an incredibly stupid statement. Israel has violated the sovereignty of Lebanon by buzzing a Hezbollah funeral. Hezbollah is the invading force which has taken over most of Lebanon, which has led to the deaths of many Lebanese. As much as we mourn the Israeli victims of Islamist terror, we will never see anywhere near as many Israeli victims of Islamist terror than there are of Muslim victims of Islamist terror. Yeah. They have destroyed a beautiful country. They always talk about how Lebanon had a civil war that started in 1976. That is a misnomer. It was an invasion. Palestinian terrorists who were kicked out of Jordan came to Lebanon after 1970, and by 1976, they were there in large enough numbers to try to take over the country. If anyone here wants to go and Google it or use Bing the videos by Bridget Gabriel, a Lebanese Christian who, to her credit, woke up at a very young age and realized what was going on. She tells great stories about how she was saved from that situation by the Israelis in the late 1970s. Very, very important woman to follow, Bridget Gabriel. She's also a big supporter of President Trump. Also, those jets that flew over weren't just any jets, Colonel. Those were the same exact jets, F-35s, that Israel used to destroy the building that Hassan Nasrallah was in and that number 2 guy. So they brought the same ones back, and that was meant as a message. There were some funny things in that video. I don't know if you saw it in some of the other takes, but some of the dignitaries who were there as those jets were flying over, like, literally just ducked a little. I don't know what that was going to do. I mean, they weren't taking any cover. They were sort of bending their head. I don't know what they thought that was going to do. It was almost laughable. But look, Hezbollah is an invading force from Iran that has taken over Lebanon after a bunch of other people. I mean, Lebanon's been a mess for almost 50 years. It's now 49 years since the Lebanese invasion war is what I call it, not a civil war. But Hezbollah is an invading force. They have destroyed any hope for a rebuilding of Lebanon. They've killed many, many, many Arabs and many, many Lebanese. They are the invading force. They are the ones who have violated Lebanon's sovereignty. The Israelis are the solution to their problem. Israelis for years have been saving Lebanese people, especially Lebanese Christians, and anyone who wanted to help. So the man is a complete moron, and he's suicidal. He should change his name from Christopher if he wants to live in Lebanon for much longer. I'll tell him that.
Yeah, I honestly think that he was probably visiting from the United States, which says something else about the stupidity here, you know. Well, we've got another question over in the audience. We're having some technical issues going on. Let's see if we can take that question. Shell, if you can hear me, go ahead.
Yes, sir. We have Wib.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you, Colonel, and thank you, Mr. Novak. I would like to take some focus and put it at the aiding and abetting that UNRWA was doing. Do you know of anything that Israel might be contemplating to hold them accountable, either suing them or getting some sort of compensation for what they did? They took an active participation in October 7th. They probably knew about the locations of the hostages. Do you have any info on that?
Well, the United States, of course, now that President Trump is back, has already moved to defund UNRWA, to take the money away from it, at least from the United States, which would be the biggest donor to it. So that's a big deal. I know that there have been some people who have suggested that the United States take that money that usually goes to UNRWA and other UN organizations and give it to the families of the victims of October 7th. That would be a very nice symbolic move. But beyond the symbolic moves, We are now in a situation, and I've always felt like it was just a pie in the sky kind of thing that people used to say. Mayor Giuliani, when he was the mayor here in New York, used to talk about the great riverfront property that the UN building would be if we turned it into residential condos. It was always kind of like a little jab. But, now I think we're serious now. I think we are now in a position now where we could have a situation, maybe not this year, but at some point in the near future, where the Trump administration seriously contemplates the United States withdrawing from the United Nations, which is mostly a pro-terrorist organization. It's also an incredible child trafficking organization. Anyone who has a brain understands that UNICEF, an organization that literally caters towards refugee children with no parents around and nobody watching, and there's no vetting of who works in that organization, that's been a problem for 60 years. I mean, I don't understand what net positives the UN brings us. I don't think there is any net positive. By the way, I used to work near the UN, and they also have destroyed all the restaurants in that area because they have free cafeterias for all the people who work there. I can't stand the UN as a New Yorker. I can't stand it as someone who supports Israel. And most importantly, I can't stand it as an American taxpayer. So those are just some of the ideas that have been put out there. But, you make a good point. We need to have more solid proposals about what to do about this. Now, we have Elise Stefanik, who's our ambassador to the UN. She's a great a mouthpiece for this, but more than just a mouthpiece, I think she's going to want to actually push some proposals in there. And even if they don't pass, even if Congress doesn't allow it, it would be a great discussion here in this country. I think that if we ask 10 Americans, even in the bluest city, in the bluest states, should we continue to spend all this money we spend on the UN? I have a feeling at least 70% of the people would answer, no, we shouldn't. And so we have to play that game now, because the American voter, I think, will back a significant withdrawal from the UN. And I'd like to hear the people who say they're so much smarter and better than us make the argument against that. They won't even bother, by the way. They won't even give us that debate. They won't meet us in public and discuss it because they know they're on losing ground.
Yeah, they're on losing ground. Think about how far this goes back. You mentioned UNICEF. I remember when I was a kid, all of my brothers and I participated in the UNICEF drives through the scouting programs to go around and collect pennies. I think it was pennies. In these little containers and everything. And it's been going on for a long time, Jake. That building, I've been in that building. When I went through the Navy War College, I was in the part of the class called the Naval Command College, which takes all their international officers that come to the course, and 4 or 5 Americans, military folks, travel around with them. I was the Air Force individual that had that privilege of doing that. And the interesting thing about that, when we went in the building, my Australian counterpart really got upset with us Americans because we were talking about, even then, and this was in the 2006, we were talking about how it needed to be eliminated and kicked out of the United States. And he said, well, you Americans, you have your democracy and everything, but this building stands for the democracy for the rest of us. And nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. It doesn't stand for any democracy. As a matter of fact, like the president has said, and you just said, it's a cover for these people that come in and do things like get on the Human Rights Council, the UN Human Rights and the refugee programs. And that's where all of this terrorism has been embraced by these UN organizations. I think UNRWA, the leadership of that organization, should be charged under the International Criminal Court. And that gets me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is, the Prime Minister of Israel has had a warrant issued against him for war crimes, I believe, by the ICC. Has there been a warrant issued by the ICC for the murdering of these little boys, the Bibas brothers?
Well, certainly not for the Bibas brothers. When they issued that warrant, they very, I think, cynically and hypocritically and in a cowardly way also issued arrest warrants for Hamas leaders who were already dead to try to prove that they were being even-handed about it, as if you can. Of course, the ICC is a UN entity, so we're not talking about two different things here. Everyone should know we're still staying on that topic. And again, as an American and talking to a veteran like you, we need to talk about the UN in even harsher terms than we already have. The UN should have been abolished, or the United States should have really tried to reform it drastically after the Korean War. The Korean War, where 49,000 American troops died, which led to absolutely no real resolution whatsoever. The UN was very much responsible for the bungling of that as well, at least from our side. Actually, I think everyone lost the Korean War. I wrote my senior college thesis about how everyone who was involved in the Korean War lost. Russia, North Korea, China, and the United States. But the UN came out unscathed, and they continued to move forward. It was outrageous. And that's just what happened with our troops there. Now, they weren't as involved in Vietnam and that fiasco, but the Korean War very much rested on the shoulders of the UN. And I can't believe that President Eisenhower didn't do more to create some kind of changes at the UN after that. I think it may have been because he was basically involved in the kind of creation of UN-like entities, NATO and things like that. Perhaps he felt like to preserve what he wanted to do with NATO, he had to keep the UN around. But certainly President Kennedy should have done something about it. Certainly President Johnson should have done something about it, all down the line. They did not, and now we have this behemoth that has caused many, many more deaths than peace around the world. And that is an absolutely objective fact. Anyone who says otherwise is lying or ignorant.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's the only place where there's a UN command with American general officers in charge of it still. And hopefully Donald Trump's team has a target on that because we know he's the only president to go into North Korea and visit with the leader of North Korea. And I think that I'm sure he's got a plan to link some kind of action and activity of the Korean Peninsula to ending the Russia-Ukraine war is what my educated guess is. I don't know anything, but the man is everywhere and has a plan in the back of his mind. He's had 4 years to think about this stuff and a team working really all this time. And it's very impressive to see what they've done so far. We got to take our last break. When we come back, we'll have one more question from the audience, but we're going to lighten it up a little bit and talk about President Trump and his innovative idea of what to do with Gaza and maybe some other foreign policy ideas that we think are going to come out from the administration. My guest is Jake Novak. We're right here on the Rob Maness Show on Worldview Tube. We'll be right back.
Finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we've been talking about the Bibas brothers murder. The war criminals that occupy the Gaza Strip, the war criminals that occupy a lot of Lebanon and are responsible for untold hundreds of thousands of deaths of not just Jewish people, but Muslims and those kind of things. And I wanted to spend this last segment of the show, though, talking about President Trump's innovative ideas of what to do with the Gaza Strip. And he posted that video you just saw yesterday. And if you didn't get a chance to see the video, go back and watch the show on video, guys. It's the video Donald Trump posted on his Truth Social account talking about, obviously, how the Gaza Strip can be made a paradise and something good could come of it. My guest today is Jake Novak. Jake, I wanted to get your thoughts, not just on the fact that the president shared the video, which is pretty impressive, but it made me smile when I saw it. I'm like, I got to talk about this with Jake and see what the real thinking is around it. Because I think he even took President or Prime Minister Netanyahu a little bit of back when he first proposed, leveling the place and just make it a real estate.
Yeah, this is a classic talking past the sale tactic that real estate agents use all the time. If you've ever shopped for a new home and the real estate agent takes you through the home, she doesn't talk or he doesn't talk to you about the mortgage and the financing all that much. He or she shows you the kitchen and says, here's where you're going to be gathering with your family on Thanksgiving. Then they show you the barbecue and tell the guy, here's where you're going to be drinking beers with your buddies and making some steaks. And it's stuff like that. That's what President Trump is doing. And as a real estate guy, I can understand why he is going in that direction. Here's the serious aspect of this that is very, very good. You know what happens when you start talking about resettling Gazans, when you start talking about creating some kind of tourist attraction? What happens is you stop using and stop talking about the most ridiculous idea that keeps getting pushed for 92 years now of the two-state solution. Nobody's talking about that anymore. No one's saying, oh, it's going to be a state in Gaza. No, they're talking about, oh, how will we resettle them? And maybe we shouldn't resettle them. And maybe we should build a casino, or maybe we should. We're having that conversation now. And finally moving away from 92 years, because it was 1933 when the British first started to pass around this idea that there should be a Jewish state and a Muslim state, an Arab state in that region. And for 92 years, the Jews have said, yes, 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 we'll take it, we'll take it, we'll take it. And the Arabs have said, no, as long as there's a Jewish state, we would rather kill and die. We are not interested. In fact, we're not really that interested in a state, just kill the Jews. So for 92 years, we've been doing the same thing over and over again. And, when you're hitting your head on the head with a hammer, it feels good when you stop. And I don't care if that is showing videos like this and getting people to understand. I think it's also, there's another aspect of this to remind people that we're not talking about a hellhole. This isn't Afghanistan, a landlocked situation. This isn't Iraq. This is a Mediterranean port, a beautiful, geologically wonderful place. And by the way, we shouldn't be so smug as Americans in thinking that we don't ruin properties like this either. I spent my teenage years in Far Rockaway, Queens, one of the most beautiful beaches in America, destroyed by Robert Moses and destroyed by politicians in New York City who put dozens of high-rise public housing projects right on the beach, taking the poor people the furthest away from the job center of Manhattan and also destroying what had been a beachfront, really like resort for the 5 boroughs of New York City. We do this stupidity stuff too. I bet you Donald Trump knows all about Far Rockaway. It's part of Queens. He knows it. So there's a lot of things going on here. Real estate, changing the conversation away from the two-state solution, and also getting people to understand that this is really a beautiful spot in the world. It shouldn't have been destroyed in this way. And the people who are living there now don't deserve to have their lives taken away. They don't deserve that, but they have lost their right to live there. Just like we take away the rights of a person to live in their home if they've committed a crime. They get to go live in jail now. They've lost their right to live there. They need to be dispersed. They need to be taken somewhere else because they've ruined an ecologically and a wonderful place and created it to a murderous hellhole. They've made Mordor, for those of you who like Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you in anything that you just said. The other thing that I'll just add to it a little bit before we go to our last question in the audience. And the other thing that it's generated is, the initial opposition by Egypt, the Jordanians. Oh no, you're going to resettle people. That's very Nazi-ish, concentration camp-ish. We're not going to stand for it. When in reality, they've never wanted any Palestinians in their country because they're afraid of what they do to the country and afraid of losing their governments. Quite frankly,
well, they'll take some of them, Colonel. They'll take some of them, Colonel. The son of President Sisi in Egypt has been collecting $8,000 a pop, 8,500 actually, from Gazans who have that money to come into Egypt. He's been the one collecting. I call him Hunter Sisi. He's found a way to make a lot of money out of being the son of the president dictator of the country. So they'll take him if there's money involved. And all we have to do as the United States is say, we don't have to give you any more money. We just won't give you the money we usually give you, $2 billion a year plus, if you don't take in some of these Gazans. So they'll take them as long as there's a money aspect to it.
Yeah, and I think that's why the Egyptian leadership is taking a leadership role. And I think the Jordanian king has even come across the line to say, hey, we need to really take a look at this. And I think there's going to be a meeting here soon of all the parties. And the Egyptians and the Jordanians are taking a leadership role in that. So maybe the real estate guy that understands money and real estate has got them to actually move off of this two-state solution craziness, and getting people out of there so that they can go live better lives. Because I bet you if I asked a Palestinian 10-year-old boy whether he would want to live somewhere else or stay right there where he's at in that mess, he would say, I want to go somewhere else so I can be free and prosperous and not face death and destruction. Well, let's go over to our audience and take this last question. Go ahead, Shell.
We have AJ, sir.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you, Colonel. Jake, it's great to hear your voice. Speaking of people who have lost the right to live, there's a 73-year-old Israeli named Moti Maman who received a 12-year prison sentence for spying for Islamic Republic of Iran and plotting assassinations of Israeli leaders. Given the fact that the October 7th, at the very least, partially, if not completely, was an intelligence failure, seeing something like this is very positive. But how should we interpret it, given the fact that we do not know the laws, Israeli laws, about treason and espionage? Thank you.
Yeah, it's anytime a country has massive enemies like Israel has, there are going to be successful intelligence and successful treasonous actions that are taken up. It's a sad fact. It's human nature. I mean, I'm sorry. No one is a completely virtuous, loyal country. It doesn't happen that way. We had plenty of traitors here in the United States during World War II. Tokyo Rose was from the United States, for example. So these kinds of things happen. And I think that prison sentence needs to be maybe even extended a little bit. That's very serious. But again, you're also dealing with a country, sadly, with massive cash flow. Iran may not be as strong as the Soviet Union was, thank goodness it isn't, in the height of the Cold War, but it has better cash flow, even if you adjust for inflation. And when you have that kind of cash flow coming in through oil sales and things like that, sadly, they're going to be able to win over some folks. It's just the way it goes. Plus, you also have mental illness, and there's a mental illness epidemic in the entire Western world, and I consider Israel to be a Western nation in its ethos and in its culture. That's another aspect. All those things need to be considered before we really understand the threats that are going on right now. But it comes back to Iran. If that money is stopped, if that money flow is slowed, then you'll see the end of not only the funding of terror, but a lot of their intelligence operations and their influence operations, which, by the way, are sadly very, very successful here in the United States. I believe there are a lot of members of the Obama and Biden administration who were absolutely paid off, just plain old paid off by Iran via Qatar. And hopefully those people are being rooted out right now as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. We've got some issues in our intelligence services, too, that are just breaking out right now. Now, did you see the National Security Presidential Memorandum -2 that was issued, I think, last night or yesterday afternoon about Iran? That's going to stop that cash flow and get it down to that very small trickle that it was before Trump left office, don't you think?
Yeah. And, also, you had that CNN report about a bunch of disgruntled CIA people who might get laid off, and now they're going to sell our secrets. I have a news for you. They were already double agents. If they're even talking about potentially selling secrets if they don't have their job tomorrow, they were never on our side in the first place. They were double agents from the very beginning. We've got a lot of, that's another reason why you shouldn't have a permanent intelligence community. I hate that term. What are you talking about? We should have spies used for the situations that we need. And there can be some permanent people who are looking at a number of different issues, but they should be cycled out pretty regularly. You can't have a community of spies. For those of you who are watching from New York City, who are my age or older, you might remember the SIU, the Special Investigative Unit. This was a plainclothes division of the NYPD where they were allowed to go after any crime and do whatever they wanted all day. Guess what? They were all corrupt. They had this great book about it called Prince of the City. You should read it. And they call, by the way, spies, one of their nicknames are princes. Well, we can't have permanent princes because they're going to be easily bought. They'll be compromised in some way. You can't have that. You've got to cycle through these folks. I think that Tulsi Gabbard is going to do that. One of the reasons why there was tremendous pushback on her. And I think she's going to prove herself real soon for the people who had doubts about her.
Yeah, I'm sure you were watching the breaking news about the sex chat room, the NSA, the CIA. It's across the board in the intelligence community, on the intel classified side where those chat rooms are managed. And they've just let it go on completely. Well, Gabbard issued a memorandum last night that's directed those folks to be identified because they can be identified by their logins and their usernames and those kind of things. It's all on the classified system. So it's recording everything, and that they're all to be fired. That's a good start right there. But she's going to have to go a lot further and really dig into this. Do you think on the intelligence organization side, maybe the analysis pieces and the operations pieces need to be separated under totally separate leadership? Right now, the CIA director manages the operations side and the analysis side. Maybe that needs to be broken up and divided so that there are some controls, kind of like an accounting system or a sensitive compartmented information type system that keeps people from being able to become double agents, triple agents, and those kind of things. At least make it more difficult, because right now they're able to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, on Wall Street, if you're a financial advisor at JP Morgan, you're not allowed to tell the clients, go buy JP Morgan stock. I mean, that's literally the Chinese firewall. Listen, Colonel, you're somewhat of, you're definitely a military historian. This is if you don't separate the operation and analysis, you get things like the Battle of the Bulge. We had already broken the Enigma machine. We knew that the Germans were planning a massive counterattack at Bastogne, but the operational people also were running the analysis. And so they all said to each other, well, our analysis was that Germany's too weak to do a counterattack. So this Enigma message must be some kind of decoy. We lost a lot of good men in that stupid failure there. You've got to separate operation and analysis, because they end up doing confirmation bias stuff. So even beyond the sex chat scandal, and by the way, if you're having sex chats or dating your coworkers, you're a loser. I'm sorry, I've never dated a coworker, and I've worked in TV news for 30 years. Believe me, a lot of attractive women. Stop dating your coworkers and don't do sex chats with them. I don't care if you're working in the military or not, but absolutely separate analysis and operation. Definitely.
Jake, thank you very much, man. We're out of time. I needed to have a 2-hour show with you on, because I love talking with you. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and we look forward to the next time you come on with us. And pray for peace, pray for our enemies, pray for Israel, pray for the United States, and pray for all those boys that lost their lives saving the Jewish people in World War II. I'll just add that in. I'm Rob Maness. We'll see you tomorrow. It's Truth Thursday. We'll have Neil McCabe, the new DC reporter for Worldview Tube, on with us to talk about the new news show that's happening on the network.